Okay guys, I'm not always the best at making guides, so I will try to do my best on this one, and I'll actually try just to see how well I can do. Anyway, um, Monk basic DPS rotation priorities, whatever you want to call it, for PvP, granted there is no such thing, but it's just sort of the basics. Um, this is what it's going to be, or at least try to be. First thing that is very important that a lot of people really underestimate is your auto attacks matter. Um, for most of Cataclysm, it didn't really matter, but coming to Mop, they matter again, and even more so for monks because occasionally you get like it's like a flurry proc. It's called Way of the Monk, I think. Maybe it's Tiger Strikes. That gives you basically Wind Fury on all your attacks. You'll see it a couple times. You'll see 4 hits right there, pop up, and it'll happen a couple times, and it does a shit ton of damage. Obviously, this is on a training dummy, so it would be roughly half. But even so, it's still a chunk of damage for something that just sort of passively goes off and is by nature off global cooldown. Um, so it is a lot of damage that you do need to be aware of, and you really want to try to maintain your auto tags as much as possible. Even if you're getting all your GCDs off and getting kited on your autos or something like that, it really can hurt a lot more than people think. So that's the first step. Make sure you right click people. Um, yeah, it's a terrible way to show an example, but they really hurt. I promise they do. Okay, so moving on into your actual abilities. Um, First thing that is ever going to matter is how you're going to get chi. Uh, Generally speaking, you use jab. It gives you a chance at mastery procs and stuff. It generates chi. It does almost no damage. It's actually pretty bad. Um, the one thing I'm going to say is expel harm. If you have missing health, does more damage than it, but it's also a self heal, so you want to use it when you need the heal, pretty much, not necessarily when you need chi. It is also your only way of getting chi without actually being in melee range. So being able to pull away and use it to get chi, or currently on live, using it when you need touch of karma or chi wave to self heal, or off heal or do whatever, is generally the strongest because, well, if a warrior has like die by the sword up, you're not necessarily going to get chi reliably. So it's the best way to do that on PTR. It's not going to be as important. You can use it more freely. But anyway, that's the two ways to generate chi. Jab obviously gives you your mastery procs. If you can get them off, use them instead. Um, Unless you need like a chunk of healing. Going into your actual rotation, Rising Sun Kick is your first priority. Um, People could debate me forever on this, and I'm just going to say it doesn't really matter. But Rising Sun Kick is your highest priority. It gives you 15% damage, applies the Mortal Strike debuff, and hits the hardest of any ability you have. Second on your priority list would be to maintain the 30% armor pen buff. Um, Obviously, Rising Sun Kick is physical, so it does scale with that. But I find that having the debuff up and having the cooldown reset more quickly because the first Rising Sun Kick doesn't get the 15% increased damage, the second one will. Getting it on cooldown as quickly as possible is generally the best strategy. So then you go into Tiger Palm, get up the armor pen buff, and you sort of just go into turreting off blackout kicks. That's pretty much it. Uh, Fist of Fury, in terms of PvP, isn't really a damage gain or a damage loss. You're going to want to use it when you need a stun, slash burst, simply because they are stunned. Um, as far as PvE goes, you don't auto attack through it, so it's a little bit of a DPS loss because the boss stands still for you. You don't need to stun it. In PvP, you pretty much just use it as a stun, and it's not necessarily a negative DPS loss or a DPS gain. It's just sort of neutral because they are stunned. You do damage. You do have your auto attacks coming out, your Rising Sun Kick if that's off cooldown, or just blackout kicks. Um, it's all pretty much the same. The one thing I will say about it is if people lag at all, or you're not positioned 100% perfectly, and they're not slowed, people can just walk out of it and still get stunned. So occasionally, if you Fist of Fury someone, they'll just be outside of it and not take damage, so you want to cancel it and then go do damage, and it sucks. But if you want it to work correctly, you want to make sure you run up to people, have your slow on them, and then Fist of Fury so they don't get out somehow. Okay, moving on. Couple things just about the innate nature of energy class or any resource class that's not mana. I guess it could matter for mana if you go but you don't really have to wait for mana anymore on melee classes. Is knowing when to step out of a fight, and it doesn't mean run away line of sight. It just means you can stop getting hit by melee attacks. Pretty much I like this spot just because that little lip you see is the edge of your auto attack range. As soon as you get off it, you're out of it as soon as you get on your end. So a couple of things to note. You have a 4-second route for PvP, which makes this really easy to do if you need to. Um, Key point in doing it would be to pool energy, stack chi, have some kind of burst going, and then you can go back in with your burst. You can also just sort of let Rising Sun Kick reset. If you're not going to really, if none of your damage is going to matter other than that, go in, do whatever, put them into a Fist of Fury stun, do anything. It's just sort of a way to stand outside of combat and knowing where your range is. So you don't want to necessarily be inside of them as far as the character models go. You sort of want to be mid-range-ish so you can get out if you need to, and you can stay in range if you need to, which is a little bit hard because obviously people with higher ping, it's a lot harder to do. Um, anyway, that's just sort of a thing to be aware of, is being able to just step out and, I don't want this warrior to hit me. I'm not going to bother hitting the warrior. I'm just going to let my energy reset, things like that. It's a useful thing to know. So just knowing your auto attack range and knowing when to get in and out and basically not waste a ton of damage. Like, I'm not going to sit there for 4 seconds when there's a Rising Sun Kick available because, generally speaking, that hits harder than any other melee ability. So I'm just going to sort of go in every time it's up. But just be aware, you kind of want a reason to fight people, whether it's a 50k blackout kick, 4 auto attacks for 50k or 60k, which would do like 60k damage in PvP as opposed to the dummy. You kind of want a reason to fight. It does do something. It's somewhat useful. Also, your auto attack timer is 2 seconds long, so you can wait 1 second and then you lose a 1 GCD still if you wait 2 seconds, but you won't take their GCD for it, so it's more beneficial to you because your auto attacks actually matter more than any others. So you technically get a little bit more damage out of it. It's pretty hard to explain, and it doesn't really matter except when you're running away, and even then, against like Rep Pallies and maybe DKs, it doesn't really help that much, but it can definitely help like right now on live against warriors, just knowing when to not take damage versus them. Colossus Smash is a big example. Alright, so here's what Blizzard says. Shows the tooltip icons because I'm lazy and don't want to edit them all in myself. Anyway, it's not that bad, just their descriptions of when to use them is off. It's not actually accurate, but it's close enough. That's pretty much it. Tiger Palm, you want to use it for the arm pin buff, that's about it. Other than that, you want a blackout kick. Rising Sun Kick is pretty much the best ability. Use it whenever it's available, that's right. Jab, generate chi, blah, 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 blah. It's pretty accurate. Anyway, I'm going to show an arena match, and it's to talk about something way more complicated than this. And I'll start to explain now. Right now on live, you could play Ascension or Chi Brew. People probably won't bitch at you either way. Both are acceptable. You can get stuck with no Chi for Touch of Karma, or anything else. So Chi Brew's okay. But next patch, on PTR, next patch 5.2, whatever you want to call it, Ascension is definitely better. Okay, when 5.2 hits, and honestly now, unless you're doing something that would call for Chi Brew being used for burst, you should probably be playing Ascension. 5.2 definitely should be playing Ascension. But with 5 Chi, oh my gosh, I have to sneeze. This is gonna suck. Anyway, playing with Ascension, you have 5 Chi, so you have kind of an option of how much Chi you want to hold. If you hold all 5, obviously you can't jab, but you can do a lot of bursts. You could Fist of Fury into a Rising Sun Kick, which potentially crits, can outright 100 to 0 people, especially if you're Mastery. But it's really hard to do. If you sit on 3 to 5, it's really tricky to do it correctly, and obviously I just wasted Expel Harm there just to generate Chi and to heal myself a little bit. I was planning on going into Fist of Fury. I actually thought it went off, and I just got instantly feared on it by Siphon, and the stun didn't actually go out, but clearly I didn't, because I used it like right here. Anyway, actually I guess I used Leg Sweep. No, I'm pretty sure I go into Fist of Fury. Yeah, there it is. Holding 1 Chi is really getting useful. The easiest example and the most obvious example probably is any Aura Mastery ability. Paladin Aura Mastery, Priest Aura Mastery, Monk Aura Mastery, somewhat Shaman Aura Mastery, even though they can run while doing it, so landing a Fist of Fury might be difficult. It's just, you're always going to be 1 GCD away from your stun. Even if you're getting trained, being 1 GCD away from a stun instead of 2 can save your life because, well, if all these classes hit for 70k GCD, which they hit harder than that, if you drop to 200k HP, there's 2 of them, they auto attack you during it, whatever, melee cleave, frostbolt, ice lance. That's a lot of damage. That can happen within the course of two GCDs. So just being closer to your stun is always nice. Playing on 3 is really hard to do, and it does actually limit some of your burst between just turreting off abilities. So it doesn't necessarily do the full job, but it can help. So it's sort of hard to explain. It's not something I hugely think about. I usually try to hold a decent amount of chi, but I don't overly stress it. So it's just something to be aware of. It is very useful to stop Aura Masteries or be closer to your stun. Um, it's not 100% necessary though, so it's sort of up to you on how you choose to use it. I still think, or would encourage everyone to try to stay on 1 chi as long as possible. Just get used to it. Once you get used to it, it's not too big of an issue, but uh, it's just something to be aware of. Um, Maybe a little bit too complicated for some of you who just want to do damage or don't really think about it that much, but it is a thing to be aware of. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about is spinning Fire Blossom. It's the reason you don't need a weapon chain. It's attack power scaling for the next 2 weeks until 5.2 comes out. Just as a little thing. You'll need a weapon chain after that, but the reason it's good is it does entirely magic damage. So armor pen and any armor doesn't really matter to it. And so, technically speaking, it's more valuable against warriors and paladins and things like that than it is against mages and warlocks, whatever. Even so, your auto attacks and abilities hit harder than spinning Fire Blossom does. Um, as you can see, it does maybe 40 Ks, and then you're looking at not having the auto attacks, which that's pretty close to my auto attack damage. It's probably double just my straight autos, the same, if not less, than when I have Tiger Strikes up, and if I'm actually using abilities, not even close. Only point in terms of armor it may be worth using is like, I think rogues get 600% increased armor when they use their Symbiosis ability. That may make spinning Fire Blossom worth using. Even so, I still wouldn't use it. I would try to do damage. It's a caster spell type thing, so it goes through Die by the Sword and Evasion. So in those cases, maybe if you can't get a stun or don't think you're going to be able to lock them down enough to actually get your abilities to hit. So it could be okay there. And in terms of making up for Roll and Flying Serpent Kick not being charged in Shadow Step, it is possibly the best ranged ability for a melee in the game. So don't just never use it or unbind it for it. It's still very good. But you shouldn't be looking at using it over a normal DPS rotation of Rising Sun Kick and Blackout Kick. So that should answer most of the questions. I couldn't think of any other ones I saw flying around my YouTube inbox or wherever, so I think that should cover it. My guides have always been pretty poor just because usually I think about way more complicated things than just basic damage rotation. So anyway, thanks for watching. Maybe I'll do stats. I'll do stats. Hold on. I'll make a really quick thing. This is probably going to be pretty bad.